All right, everyone. Going through this chapter 2.4, changes in market equilibrium, and I know that this is actually one of those chapters that has a tendency to trip people up because there's just a lot going on. And again, I think this emphasizes the theme throughout a lot of these difficult questions, and that you want to break things down into simple components and then attack the problem kind of a step at a time. So what I want to do here is I want to kind of go over this section on multiple shifts, and you can kind of read along in the textbook and then follow along in this video, and hopefully it'll clear up a lot of the issues that you have just with going over multiple shifts and how do you interpret all the things that are going on in this particular chapter. So the section starts out by saying, let's just look at the gasoline market in the year 2000, right? So we want to really explain how gasoline prices have changed over time from, say, 2000 to 2008, 2008 to 2009, and then from 2009 onwards. So if we just start in 2000, what we would do is say, let's look at this first supply and demand graph and just draw some generic curves on here where we have a downward sloping demand curve. We can go ahead and put demand 2000 and an upward sloping supply curve, and we can go ahead and put supply 2000. So we've got our equilibrium right here, and we can go ahead and put E 2000, and we've got our quantity in 2000 and our price in 2000. Okay, so we're not necessarily worried about the specific price levels or the quantity levels right now. We're just going to end up getting shifts in these curves of supply and demand and showing how that changes the price and the quantity and equilibrium values. Okay, so between 2000 and 2008, if you kind of scroll through the book, what you see is that U.S. personal income over this time period went up quite a bit. So income goes up over this time period. And you're also told that OPEC oil production, which a lot of the gasoline the oil used for gasoline comes from, it goes up a little bit between 2000 and 2008. This would be figure 2.4.07, but it's not a ton, right? It's not a lot of production increase over this time period. So we'd say a small increase in oil production. Okay, when we think about what happens when we have this small increase in oil production combined with this big increase in income, we should be saying to ourselves at this point, this big increase in income, this is going to lead to a big demand increase. So I'm going to put two arrows here just to signify that income's going up quite a bit, at least relative to this oil production increase, so we should expect demand to go up quite a bit. If we look at the small increase in oil production, what's that going to do? Well, our supply is going to increase. That's going to shift to the right, but that supply increase will not be as big as the demand increase. So again, if you just look at the figures on OPEC oil production between 2000 and 2008 and personal income in the U.S. between 2000 and 2008, you'll see that increase in income is quite a bit more than that increase in oil production. So let's go ahead and draw those new curves. I'm going to draw this new supply curve relatively close to the original one and go ahead and just label that supply 2008. Okay, we can have this shift here. Now that's putting downward pressure on prices, increasing the quantity in equilibrium if there's no change in demand. All right, but there is a change in demand. There's this big increase in consumer incomes. So what's that going to do? That's going to shift that demand curve far to the right. And now we've got demand 2008 way out here, and we've got a big shift in demand relative to supply. Where's our new equilibrium? Well, now we're at equilibrium 2008. We've got a quantity that's a lot higher than it was before, and that price has also went up. Okay? So this is what happened between 2000 and 2008, and we can just show that increase in price and quantity just by looking at equilibrium 2000 to equilibrium 2008. Okay, so that's the first part of our analysis with regards to the gasoline market. And if you're following along with this just aligns with figure 2.4.8 in the textbook. Okay, so then the next part of this section says what happens between 2008 and 2009. all it does is it extends this U.S. personal income from 2000 to 2008 by an extra year. So we go from 2000 to 2009 now. And what you'll notice is that between 2008 and 2009, there was a real sudden decrease in income, right? So you have to kind of think about it in terms of how people are reacting to this income increase over a long period of time from 2000 to 2008, and then there's this sudden drop in income in 2009, and it's actually pretty noticeable. It's about 7-8% throughout the entire country. So when we think about what is this going to do to the demand for normal goods like gasoline, well, that's going to drive that gasoline demand down quite a bit. Okay, well, what happened to to OPEC oil production over this time frame, this 1 year time horizon? Well, it's not surprising to see that if we look at figure 2.4.10, there really wasn't any change in OPEC oil production between 2008 to 2009. So let's just make the assumption that supply is unchanged. All right, so I got arrows going left and right, signifying that there's no change in this OPEC oil production. There's no change in supply. Okay, all right. So let's take this information from 2008 to 2009 and put it on this supply and demand graph above. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to start in an old equilibrium, or I guess we'll say 2008 equilibrium, right? And we'll draw that demand curve right here, and we'll draw that supply curve right here. So notice I'm going to label these now supply 2008, demand 2008. So this is where we ended on the previous graph. Right? We've got a quantity 2008, and we've got a price 2008. Okay, so I just moved this equilibrium 2008 over to the next graph just so we don't have too much going on the same picture, okay, or the same graph. Okay, so let's show what happens when we have this big decrease in demand, no change in supply. Well, this should be a comfortable place for us at this point. Let's go ahead and just decrease demand by quite a bit, and now we're out here at demand, we'll say 2009, and we'll label that right here. What's happened to our new equilibrium? Well, we've got a decrease in the quantity from 2008 to 2009, and we've got a decrease in the price from 2008 to 2009. So here's our drop, all right, in equilibrium from equilibrium 2008 to 2009. Okay, so let's kind of look at this before we move on to the next time period. We could say from 2008 to 2009, we've got a price increase and a quantity increase because that demand increase outweighed that supply increase. Between 2008 and 2009, prices went down, quantity went down because we have no change in supply, but a big decrease in demand. Okay. So now we're left with kind of this picture between 2000 to 2008, 2008 to 2009. Let's go one step further and see what happens between 2009 and 2016. Okay, so if you look down at figure 2.4.12 in the textbook, what's going on? Well, we've got more information about U.S. personal income, and we see the recovery from the Great Recession. So we see income going up, right? Now, at the same time, this 2000 to 2016 period overall, there was a change in the automobile industry. Specifically, there were more hybrids. So we've got more hybrids coming out between 2000 and 2016, and specifically 2009 to 2016. So we've got a lot more fuel efficient cars out there. There's a lot more people driving them. The quality of those cars have went up, right? So we can think about these two things as telling us there's an increase in demand for gasoline because income goes up, but then there's a decrease in demand for gasoline because people are buying hybrids as opposed to, say, buying an SUV. So we've got these counteracting effects with demand, so we can kind of make the argument that there's going to be no change overall. Okay, so let's make the assumption there's not a huge change or a noticeable change in demand between 2009 and 2016. But if we look at OPEC oil production in figure 2.4.14, we see that went up, right? OPEC oil production that increased between 2009 and 2016. Not by a huge fraction, but definitely by a noticeable amount. It went from about 31 million barrels a day to about 35. That's an important jump. But really, the place to look is in the next figure when you're looking at U.S. oil production. U.S. oil production during this time period nearly doubled. Right, it was about 5 or 6 million barrels a day in 2009, 2010, and it jumped up to almost 10 million barrels a day by 2015, and kind of leveled out around 8 or 9 million. So we've got a really big increase in supply of U.S. oil production over this time period. So we could say, let's put two arrows pointing up for supply. So we've got a big shift in supply, or increase in supply, between this 2009-2016 time period. So let's show this on the graph, right? So let's center ourselves where we ended on the previous slide, okay? So we've got a downward sloping demand curve, and we're going to call this demand 2009. We've got our upward sloping supply curve, and let's again call this supply 2009. All right, we can go ahead and put ourselves in equilibrium right here in 2009. Here's our quantity. Let me make that a little bit straighter. All right, so we've got 2009 for our quantity, and we've got a price right here, price 2009. Okay, so then what happens by 2016? Well, let's make the assumption that, again, demand hasn't changed much, so we've got demand 2016 at the same level as demand in 2009. So that's a strong assumption. There's certainly things that change between that time period, but for our purposes, we can go ahead and keep those things constant, that demand curve constant. But now let's increase this supply curve and shift it to the right quite a bit. Okay, so now we've got our supply curve for 2016 way out here. So we've got supply 2016. So our new equilibrium is at equilibrium 2016. We've got this big quantity supplied, or a large quantity supplied. We've got a lower price level, price 2016, and we've got this movement from 2009 to 2016. Okay, so overall, we would say that between 2009 and 2016, we've got this price decrease coupled with this quantity increase. Okay, so we've got a lot of things going on between these time periods. Let's see if we can break this down into a little bit simpler graph, or simpler way to show this information, right? So if we look at this this little table that I'm about to put together, we've got years, we've got how did our price change and how did our quantity change over these different time periods. So if we go back and say between 2000 and 2008, how did that price change? Well, if you remember, we had that big increase in demand and a smaller increase in supply. This led to an increase in prices and an increase in quantity. So 2008, we were buying more gas at a higher price. Between 2008 and 2009, we had really not a big change, or really no change in supply, but this big decrease in demand, because we had this great recession causing more unemployment, lower incomes. This ultimately led to a decrease in demand, which decreased the price, decreased the quantity. Then we had the recovery between 2009 and 2016. This recovery had a lot of income growth, but at the same time it had this growth in the purchase of hybrids. So you got these things kind of counteracting each other in the demand on the demand curve. So we made the assumption there's no change in demand, but we had this big increase in supply. So what happened? We've got this decrease in price between 2009 and 2016, but an increase in quantity. Okay, so now that we've got these things kind of we'll say simplified a little bit, we can go ahead and map that to these time graphs that are comparing time and equilibrium price and quantity. Okay, so what I mean by that is, let's look at, say, the year 2000, go up to 2008, go to 2009, and then go to 2016. Okay, so if we think about what happened to price between 2000 and 2008, we had this big increase in price, and then between 2008 and 2009, we had a decrease, and then between 2009 and 2016, we had a further decrease. So I'm just following along from increase from the table. We've got a decrease, and then another decrease, okay? What happened to quantity? Well, we can do the same thing. We can go from 2000 to 2008, 2008 to 2009, and then 2009 to 2016. So what happened to our quantity between 2000 and 2008? That was that push up from demand. Between 2008 and 2009, we've got this decrease right here. So we've got a decrease going down. So we've got increase plus a decrease. And then between 2009 and 2016, not a big change in the demand curve, but we moved along the demand curve because supply was going up. Now we've got this increase in the quantity that's bought and sold. Okay, so when we look at our graphs, we'd say, well, we would expect the price of gasoline to move like it does right here on this graph, going up and then down between 2000 and 2016. Quantity is going to go up, then it's going to decrease during the Great Recession, then pop back up as we recover. So if we map this particular simplification to the data, you can do that in the textbook and take a look at that, and you'll look at figure 2.419 and 2.420, and you'll see that we do a pretty good job matching up our expectations, our theoretical predictions with the actual data. There's obviously a lot more going on, a lot more noise, particularly with respect to the price, because there's things like speculation and outside investments that are changing all the time. And so we've made a lot of assumptions, but it's nice to see that our simple supply and demand model, with just looking at income, hybrids, and oil production, can give us a nice guide as to how this gasoline market's gonna move. So this kind of takes you through again chapter 2.4 really as a whole. If you're having more issues, kind of go back and read the chapter again. Maybe watch this video, different parts of it, to make sure you fill in any gaps, and then step back and go to the start of the section where there's just single shifts in a gasoline market or any other markets you're interested in, and hopefully those markets are going to seem, and those markets are going to seem a little bit simpler along with those shifts. So hoping this helps your studying, and good luck. We'll see you guys in the next video.